Hospitals have always been a pretty scary place for kids, and I know it's not on anybody's top 10 list of places where you want to visit, but especially for kids it's always been very scary. A lot of anxiety and fear is based around a hospital stay or even working with hospitals or doctors, and that really had to change. Just recently, a 6-year-old girl had to come into a hospital and have a series of operations and procedures. It was quite invasive and she was very scared. She was actually petrified at the hospital. But when they walked into the treatment room, the nurse pulled out a distraction box for the little girl and started using some toys and items that are in this box to try and calm her down and take her mind off what was about to happen. And over a series of a few days, her stress and anxiety started reducing, and by the 5th day she actually said to the nurse, you know what, I don't need the distraction box, I don't need to be distracted, I know what's going on and I don't have a fear, I'm not scared. Which was remarkable. It was a great example of how distracting a child at the right time can make a world of difference to that child. To top this off though, her 4-year-old brother had to come in and have a very similar procedure a couple of weeks later. So when the family walked into the treatment room, the 6-year-old girl grabbed the distraction box out and started distracting her younger brother, which was amazing. And we got a phone call from the nurse to say that the program that you developed is incredible and you've been able to help kids distract kids, which is the goal of what we're about. I'll take you back some 20-odd years. I used to have a successful gymwear label with my brother, and we did that for a few years, and unfortunately we hit some pretty hard times and we pretty much lost everything. So we went into some major financial trouble, but even though we lost it all, we kept positive, and in fact we kept so positive that we started doing motivational workshops for people to try and teach them how they could be positive as well, going through any sort of emotional, financial or physical loss. And that led to working with street kids. We used to do some work with kids in high school, dealing with final exams. And then it led me to a camp that was working with kids with cancer. And that's where I met a young boy by the name of Francis. He was only 17 years old, and back then I was only a few years older than Francis, but he was very sick. And on the camp, unfortunately, he was the sickest kid, and sadly, a few days after the camp, he got a phone call from his doctor to let him know that he only had about a month to live. And Francis gave us a call, and that was the first time I'd heard anybody talk like that, because you see it on the movies and it's not really reality. And it blew me away. So I spent a lot of time with Francis, and this is a photo of when he was in his prime. He was an amazing young guy, and he was into sports, and he just loved life. And unfortunately, the disease took that away from him. So that last few weeks, spending a lot of time with Francis and doing a lot of one-on-one workshop, keeping him positive, keeping his spirits up as much as we could, he had 3 simple wishes. He wanted a surfboard, he wanted a pair of runners, and he wanted to take one breath without pain. He knew we couldn't use these things, especially the runners and the surfboard, because he was that sick. His chest only moved about 5 to 10 millimetres each time he was breathing. But he knew that they were the things that made him happy, and that's what he wanted. So they were pretty easy to organise. I didn't have any money back then either, so I had to pull a few favours. But part of the motivational workshops was teaching people very basic meditation as well, just visualisation, goal setting, things like that. So I sat down with Francis, and it took about 45 minutes to do a meditation with himself, his nurse as well. And he actually took 3 deep breaths without any pain at all. And even his nurse said it was like a miracle happened. So it was very emotional but very rewarding. And sadly, a couple of days later, Francis did pass away. And speaking with his mum, she said that he knew the illness had beaten him. He was happy that everybody had done as much as they could. So he was at peace, but he wanted to have one more breath so he could feel like a normal kid just one more time. And she said, you gave him that breath. And as soon as she told me that, I thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm very fortunate from being only in my early 20s to know, I suppose, the calling that I had. So from Francis and working with these other kids, the concept was to help more kids. How can we help more kids? So we did more motivational workshops, I did some DJing work, we did some drug and alcohol-free concerts for kids, whatever we could do and whatever it took. And it was very hard, but we kept on going to try and raise more money and help more kids. And through that process, ended up working with about 6 different families, and one boy in particular, his name was Michael. And Michael was only, he was turning 16, and unfortunately he was wheelchair bound, but his dream was to fly. And we organised a flight in a stunt plane for Michael, and I tell you, I've never seen a bigger smile on a kid's face. And shortly after, also organised a phone call from Jimmy Barnes to wish Michael a happy birthday. And Michael had been transferred to a different hospital at that stage, so it was because of that phone call that I met Anna Darris, who was in the PR department at the hospital where Michael was staying. So Anna took us up and we saw Michael. The phone call came through and Jimmy spent about 15 minutes on the phone with him. So it wasn't just a happy birthday. I'm not a very good Jimmy Barnes impersonator, but he had a chat with him. And when he finished the conversation, Michael turned and said, this is the best day of my life. And it really moved me. I thought it was so easy to organise. It made such a difference to this kid, and it was like a fraction of a second out of my life to help him. So Anna took us through the hospital, and I had a very good chat with Anna about the amount of charities that were out there supporting these kids. And I was under the impression that all the kids in hospitals, with all the charities that are out there, and so much money was being raised, that not one child in hospital would go without if they needed extra support. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So I had lengthy conversations with Anna and a lot of the doctors and nurses and social workers that said, what has to change? Something has to change here, because it didn't make sense. I was so frustrated that I was actually dumbfounded. So we had a concept of setting up a charity for a very short period of time to try and encourage the larger and more well-funded and more well-established charities to maybe open their doors just a little bit and make sure they were catching the kids that were falling through the gaps. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and it didn't happen. And we kept going, and years and years went past, and still nothing was changing. In fact, we were receiving requests from the larger organisations because we had such a fast turnaround time for supporting these kids. So the idea that we had to come up with was something that was efficient, simple and fast. And that meant that we were providing that support for the kids when they really needed it the most. So we couldn't have waiting lists, we couldn't have them having to fit some sort of criteria or going through some sort of lengthy process to have even a little bit of emotional support and practical support for these kids. We did this in a couple of ways, one of which is our rapid TLC service, where healthcare professionals identify a need for a child, and they might be needing equipment. They might be having to have accommodation or even a fridge or a laptop or even helping out with a funeral. Whatever it might be, the healthcare professionals identify a need of the child, they get in contact with us, and we make it happen within 24 to 48 hours. There's no conditions, it's any child, so it might be a child that's had an accident, there might be burns, cancer, cystic fibrosis, whatever the situation is. The healthcare professionals look at the emotional state of the child and then they refer the kids to us. A lot of people refer to us as the fire brigade of children's charities, because if you think about the fire brigade, you don't call them a couple of weeks or a month after you're watching your house burn down. You call them immediately because you need their action straight away. And that's how we look at any child in hospital that needs a bit of support, because you have to do it immediately. The other program we have set up, and to make the service even faster, is our distraction box. All the items that have been chosen inside of the distraction box have been specifically chosen by healthcare professionals to distract kids during an examination or procedure. At the moment, the boxes have been that successful, they're being used about 800,000 times every year in hospitals around the country. And that's a pretty big number, but when you compare that towards the 1.8 million kids that are visiting a hospital under the age of 15, we're reaching about 38% of those kids at the moment. Getting the idea off the ground had caused a lot of stress. It was hard. It was very difficult to try and convince people to support a charity that was helping all kids. So we went through a lot of struggle. We put our heart and soul and money and everything we had into the organisation. We even got down to $93 left in the bank. And that was our mincemeat and rice period. It was very tough for us. And at that period, we had a radio appeal by Neil Mitchell, who ran the fundraiser for us, and they raised $150,000 in 3.5 hours, which literally saved the charity. And it was one of the most overwhelming things that people were donating money to us to help more kids in hospital. Since then, though, because we have persisted, we've been able to service over 400 hospitals around the country. We have over 1,700 distraction boxes in use, and we've been able to fulfil over 6,000 individual rapid TLC requests for kids that are going through very tough times. We've also been able to reach and deliver over 4 million smiles for kids. We've been able to raise over $10.5 million since 1998, and we're reaching more kids than any other charity in the country. And every time I talk about these stats, it blows me away that we're reaching so many kids and making such a difference for a charity that didn't exist 16 years ago. I'm also very honoured and humbled that I won the Australian of the Year Local Hero Award for this year. And the only reason why I say this is because, number one, it was one of the biggest milestones in my life, but it's created a great platform to be able to talk about the community and encourage other people to try and get involved with something. Now, why am I telling you all this today? Why am I sharing a little bit about my life? Because I really want you all to find a cause that makes you smile. Think about what you can do. You might be able to offer something, you have special skills. You might be able to provide any sort of support you can. But I ask you to do your research. Find out what the charity is all about. Find out what impact they're doing. If they're duplicating services, if there's waiting lists, why they're waiting lists. But most importantly, look at the cause and have something that makes you passionate, makes your heart sing. Because it's very important. It means longevity as well. But if you can do something every day that makes your heart sing, and even sometimes get a little bit teary, I think that's what life's all about. But never think it's about you. So if you are getting involved with the charity, please think about it as something that you're going to be able to give that charity. A little bit about myself. I had a very normal childhood, and I consider myself very lucky. I had a loving family, and I was always taught to respect people from the youngest age, but also look out for people if they need some help. And I'm telling you this because I don't have any biological children. I met my stepdaughter in 1998, and when I set up TLC for Kids, I didn't know anyone was sick apart from the kids I was working with. So my family was healthy, my friends were healthy, my circle, everyone was healthy. And I didn't understand what illness was until I saw these kids going through this trauma, and I stood there and I thought, I can't stand for this, I have to do something about it. And that's why I chose to set up TLC for Kids. And I'm very, very lucky that I have found my cause to smile, and I hope you do too. Thank you.